Okay, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Skagler Bones. I'm your host today. Today we are doing part 3 of our bike fit series on making sure your bike fit properly, what components you need that are most important in, as we talked about before in the previous 2 videos, the 4 or 5 levels of bike fit. As I said previously, I believe that there, in kind of some information that I've written up, 4, possibly 5 levels of bike fit, and the most important being a level 1 fit components, and then finally either, if you consider it 5 levels, the 5th level, and then of course if you believe it's 4, consider it as 4. If you want to simplify it a little bit more, you could go at the level 4 components and of level component, and that would be the most important as well. So your first level and your last level, those are the most important when you're considering bike fit componentry for comfort and things like that. So overall, we talked about frame size isn't right here. We have our road bike. We have our Jemus bicycle up there. When we start to talk about the frame, we'll get into the Jemus as well. But as I've said before, frame size is not as important, I believe, as some of the other componentry. You can, for the most part, make a smaller frame like we have with the Giant Propel. This is quite a bit smaller than that Jemus frame there, and I've made this to work for me. Of course, we're dealing with more of an aero frame. I'm getting a little bit more in an aero position. There's quite a bit more drop in this between my bike seat, or my saddle, and my handlebar position. So, obviously, first of all, the first level component we talked about is your pedals and ultimately your shoes. Shoes, we're not going to be talking about kit, just so you understand. I'm not going to be talking about clothing per se, such as gloves or shorts and chamois, although those are very important to your riding and comfort on the bike. These go a little bit beyond that of fit. I have a video that covers bicycle kit, what types of kit you should have, what types of gloves you should use, what types of shorts and chamois. This is more of a clothing type of I don't want to say issue, but more of a clothing type of thing that you need to look at when you go to your bicycle shop. Okay, so, and it depends what type of riding you're doing. Whereas you can be wearing non-cycling shorts and still be pretty much comfortable as long as your bike fit is proper. Okay, so we're not really talking about that. That's not what we're going to be covering today. So, already talked about saddles. We talked about our pedals and shoes. Of course, I believe shoes are part of your fit components because they're what directly attached to your cleats. Unlike other kit or other clothing items, your shoes are a little bit more specific in the fact that you have carbon fiber soles, and then you have more of your nylon or plastic soles. So it is a little bit more of a fit component. And then the last level 1 fit component is your handlebars. Okay, so handlebars are quite important, but on a different level that most people consider handlebars to be an important part of the fit component. So most people think the difference between aluminum and carbon fiber, and that's what makes your comfort in your handlebars. And to some extent that is true. Carbon fiber handlebars are going to take a little bit of the shock, and they're going to dampen some of the vibration that is going to appear into the handlebars, into your hands. So that might help in some numbness issues if that's what you're having. Because ultimately, as you're riding down the road, what occurs, because we don't have shocks like we do in a mountain bike, what happens is, first of all, one of the main things that transfers shock and bumps into the frame of the bike is your tires. Okay, so tires are vitally important. Of course, this being level 4 or level 5, we consider level 5 componentry, we would say the tires. So we're going to talk about this. Our componentry is level 5 for the sake of the series, but a level 5 would be your tires, and the tires are one of the most important things for vibration reduction on the bicycle. It's not necessarily a fork, it's not necessarily a frame, it is your tires first and foremost. You can have a pretty rigid, pretty solid bike, steel frame bike, steel fork, all that stuff, have some nice wide, thick tires, and it's a pretty comfortable ride. In fact, we could go so far as to look at our mountain bike over here. And as you can see by these tires, these are quite wide, thick tires, and we have quite a bit less air pressure in these. Now, I have high air pressure in these for normal mountain bike tires. I'm running about 40 psi in these just because of my weight. So I run a little bit higher pressure, but these are going to be considerably more comfortable than my road bike tires. And I'm going to focus back on the road bike here. Vice versa, let's come over here and pull out a pair of giant 23 millimeter tires. So these are 23 millimeter tires. As you can see here, 23C, 23 millimeters, and you're pumping these up to 120 psi, vice the 85 or 90 psi that I keep these 25 millimeter gator skin hard shells. These are going to be considerably more comfortable on bumpy roads. So what happens is it translates the bumps from the tires into the wheels and the spokes. The fewer spokes you have, a little bit more comfortable it's going to be. Okay. Into the fork. And of course, the rear wheel is going to come into the seat stays, up into the back and into the frame, and then ultimately into your seat post back here. Okay, so if this is carbon fiber, you're going to get some dampening here, and if your stem, and you can choose. Some people have gone with a stem that's carbon fiber, which does give you dampening, especially with a carbon fiber fork, and ultimately handlebars. So I believe more in handlebars being carbon fiber, vice your stem being carbon fiber, or what is a good combination, which Giant does provide, is they have a wall one-piece carbon fiber stem that's all one solid piece, provides a lot more vibration reduction for your hands. So those are very good when it comes to that. So those tend to be a very good fit component. But with something like that, you really have to get the exact size that you need. You really have to size that out specifically. Try different sizes before you go and order something like that, because you're talking about almost a $300 item there with a combination aero bar and stem. Sorry, aero bars and yes, aero bars and stems. So when you go into something like a combo aero bar and stem, they're going to be quite pricey. So you want to make sure that you get the perfect size for you. Obviously, on this bike, one of the other thing that you want to make sure that you have, and I'm going to kind of pull out. We're not going to get the exact size with this because it's not really wide enough. I only got 40 millimeters here. But if I was to measure this, when you measure the width of your bars and handlebars, what you want to do is from the center of the brake lever to center of the brake lever. That's where you're going to measure from. And if I was to actually measure this, if I was to come over to, as you can see here, this only goes to 40, but we actually get probably about 42 centimeters here altogether with black edge. So if we came over, we could actually say these bars, by the way, are 42 centimeters in width. So these are 42 centimeters. If I went up to my Jamis bike, which are quite a bit wider, there are roughly 45 centimeters in width, maybe 44. So they're a little bit wider, not too much wider, but it depends. That is going to determine your comfort. It is also going to determine, handlebars will determine also how more aero you are on the bike, because to a certain extent bringing your arms together a little bit closer if we look here, so as I come back, I'll give you kind of a demonstration here. So as I bring my arms together this way, I'm actually, as I'm already curved over the bike, my shoulders are going to be pulled in a little bit. So pulling my hands in by a couple centimeters is going to make me a little bit more aero on the bike as I'm down in the drops or even up on the hoods. Okay, so it is important. Handlebar width is very important to not just your fit on the bike, but also what you're trying to accomplish on the bike. So if you're getting more into racing and you're getting more into an aero bike, you might want to consider decreasing the width of the handlebars by just a little bit. If you look at the pros, how they do it, of course they stay a lot more fit than us normal riders, but they ride probably about a 2 centimeter to 3 centimeter smaller bike frame than what we will normally ride. And what that does is not so much gets your seat post down lower and raises your seat up higher. What it does get is the front end down a little bit lower. So they ride with a little bit smaller frame, a little bit smaller handlebars. Not much, just a couple centimeters, and they customize their body to that. They become a little bit more flexible. So as we become a little bit more flexible, you get a little bit more used to riding. It's good to kind of, I don't want to say you want to overly decrease the size of your bike, but by making your bike slightly smaller, you become a little bit more aero, you become a little lighter and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to go into super light componentry to lower the weight of your bike. You can just get a slightly smaller frame. If you are more flexible, you're finding out that you can do things, get in a little bit more aero position. So when I first started out, I started off on the Janus. As we poke up here, I'm not going to bring the Janus down off the wall just because I don't want to put the front wheel in, but this is a 61 centimeter frame, so it is considerably bigger. But if I put it next to the Giant Propel, the back of the seat tube here, this portion here actually comes to the same spot as it does on the Giant. Okay, the only difference is that this has a lot taller head tube, which lifts the body up a little bit more upright. So instead of being down in a more aero position, it lifts you up in a little bit more upright position. Now the difference is that the top tube is a little bit longer on the Ventura, on the Janus here with the 61 centimeter frame. So you still are in a decently progressive stance. It is still a pretty good fast bike, even though it's more of an endurance bike. You have a little bit more gap here in the aft wheel well. The nice thing about this bike is if you're looking for a little bit more endurance, this is a good bike to have. But it still has very snappy steering in the front end because it's a little bit more upright fork, a very straight fork, not a curved fork. Very heavy duty fork here, but it allows, it is quite a wide fork, so you can put in a little bit wider tires as well. But you're getting a little bit more upright position with a larger bike like this, okay? And so obviously your seat post doesn't have to be up as high because you are riding a slightly larger frame. In the old days, and I'm talking about in the 60s and the 70s, with steel frame bikes, for the most part, most bikes, there wasn't a whole lot of difference in frames. Most frame sizes were right around 58 centimeters in size. So small riders, tall riders, unless you were extremely short rider, most people were riding almost all the same size frame. You'd see guys with very low seat posts in the back, that their seat saddle height was to here because all the frames were very large. So people weren't riding up in very super aero positions, and the way they got more aero is the handlebars weren't these compact air handlebars like you see here. So it's very important to know that most handlebars today are very compact. They had a very huge drop, in fact probably about an extra 2-inch drop on the old style handlebars, and that allowed for a lot more aerodynamic positions. The other thing too that was quite a bit different was brake levers. The brake levers were designed to be way down here. So your handlebars, even though the tops of the handlebars were way up here and you'd be in a very upright position, to get on the hoods you'd be in a very down, probably an extra 2-3 inches down. So that was part of the reason why the frames were a little bit bigger. The handlebars were designed differently. There was a lot of difference in design. You had quill stems, you didn't have bolt-on stems, things like that. So a lot different in design. So back to kind of how this works. So one of the things that I did, and this is just something that I've done, is I went from a larger 44 centimeter wide handlebar to a slightly less wide 42 centimeter wide bar. So because I'm dealing with a little bit smaller frame, I didn't want to have my arms out farther. I could have had them out, but I found that as I get older, it becomes a little bit more comfortable for me to bring my arms in just a couple centimeters. One thing that you can do, and this goes for, and we'll kind of move over to the mountain bike here, because mountain bikes are almost the same thing, even though they have different styles of handlebars. You don't have drop bars on your mountain bike here. As you can see, you have flat handlebars. Flat handlebars are measured in millimeters, but obviously these are quite a bit wider. So when you're measuring, your arms are going to be out a little bit wider. It gives you a little bit more control than narrow. And there, it used to be the narrow, you had narrow handlebars like this. They're very narrow. Now your handlebars have gotten a little bit wider. Let me bring out my old handlebars that I had. It's the old steel ones. They had a lot more rise too, by the way. So, as you can see here, these are my old ones, and my position would have been right here because I have bar ends on them like I do on my new ones. So there would have been my position right there. Okay. There's not a huge difference. As you can see here, there's not a massive difference, but the amount of these bar ends, which is probably about 10 millimeters, so I got about 20 millimeter difference. So we're talking about the difference between, let's say, 680 millimeters and 700 millimeters here for this bar, these handlebars. I'm not sure exactly what these come out to. So you put these down, I'll measure them here real quick. But the big thing is when you're looking at getting handlebars for a mountain bike, you want to do a push-up and see where you're comfortable at, because on a mountain bike you're pretty much doing a push-up. Okay, so what you're doing is you're on the bike and you're pushing up and down, and you have your grip here like so, between your shift levers, your levers here, and your brakes. And if you have hydraulic disc brakes, you're going to be using typically just one finger, because you're going to have these very short brake levers like so. If you have to come out here, and I use bar ends because where I'm at in Guam, we do get into some hills, and when you're on the road, you get a little bit having to be on the road a little bit. So the fact is, this gives me a little bit more versatility. For the most part, I'm here, but this gives me some versatility if I have to get up with these. If I have to ride a couple miles on the road, and this just gives me some versatility to have my hands in a slightly different position. Okay, most of the time on the trail, you're going to be like this, because you need that control with all your levers. Okay. Obviously, same thing with a mountain bike. You can have your carbon fiber that is going to dampen a lot of the chatter off the road, but for the most part with a mountain bike, most of the comfort's going to come from the fork. It's not going to actually come. It's going to come from your shocks, not from your handlebars. Okay, so you're going to, for the most part, unless you're riding long distance on the roads with a mountain bike, you're really not going to get any numbness in your hands the same way that you would on a road bike. So on a road bike, you get a little bit of numbness because of your hands are in the same position for long periods of time, whereas if you do get numbness on a mountain bike, it's mostly because of the vibration and things like that. Okay, and you're bouncing up and down quite a bit, your arms are moving, and you're gripping pretty hard on the handlebars here. Okay, so let me look here. Let me get out my measure. Millimeters. So, well, we're not going to even get a good accurate measurement here. We got, let's see. 400, 500, 600, 620 millimeters for this. Very short bars, okay? And these aren't even that long. These are kind of short compared to a lot of people ride, but we got, let's see, 400 right here. So you got, these guys are almost 700 millimeters wide, okay? So yeah, I could stretch this out a little bit. I could have gotten them slightly wider handlebars, but I'm not really used to riding with really wide handlebars on my mountain bike, so that's kind of what I went with. Yeah, I have bigger, broader shoulders than a lot of people, but just because you have broader shoulders doesn't mean that's what you're comfortable riding with. So really, handlebars width is a lot of personal preference. So especially on mountain bikes and especially on road bike. Now there is a little bit of science to this, but there's a certain point when too wide handlebars can be uncomfortable for you, even if you have broad shoulders. Now, for the most part, I am gonna say this, that if you want to measure handlebars for a road bike, the best method, if you want to get in the ballpark, is you take your handlebars when they're off the bike, when you're purchasing, you take the handlebars, you put them up to your shoulder, and the edge here, the curve here should hit where your shoulders are at the top, okay? So that if I want to keep my arms straight, in a straight position. I don't want to have my arms bowed out like so. Let's see if I can get back here and position the camera. So you don't want to have your arms like this as you're on the bike. You don't want to have your arms bowed out like this. You don't want to have them like this where your arms are out like this. You want to have them very nice, relaxed, bent position so that you're on the drops. Sorry, you're on the. I'm going to take my bike out of the stand. So when you have your bike here, bring the camera down a little bit. So when you have your bike here and you're right here, your arms are in kind of a more relaxed position like so, okay? And then you can adjust yourself to get more aero even when you're on the hood. 90% of the time, your time is spent on the hood. So I'm going to kind of straddle over the bike here without falling down. Okay, so I'm over the bike. Imagine I'm sitting on the bike, and so a couple positions that you have is you can have, for the most part, you're going to be in this position. Your hands are going to be like so, as you can see here. My hands aren't too wide out, they're not too far in. Obviously I don't want handlebars like this, not that they make them that thin, or I'm like this compared to my shoulders. Okay, I'm going to spin the camera directly in front. Let's do this, okay? So as you can see here, let's see here, just the camera up just a little bit here. Okay, so you can see the width of my shoulders, right? And as you can see here, when I hold on to these handlebars like this, these are 42 centimeters wide. My hands aren't too far out. They're not too far in. They're just right, okay? Now my other handlebars were like just right to here, so it would have been literally like, just like this, okay? But you don't want to be bowing. Some people, they ride like this, but look what happens to your hands. You're still in a decent position of control, but you don't have as much control. And also over time, what's going to actually happen is you're going to give yourself bursitis of the elbow. So if you're out like this, kind of doing this type of push-up, what will happen over time is as you get older, you have these soft tissue areas in your elbows, and they're going to inflame, and you'll get bursitis, and it's going to be very uncomfortable for you. Okay, so the last thing you really want to do as a cyclist, because bursitis is extremely painful. If you guys don't know what that is, look it up online. but it's a very painful thing. I've gone through it before, not riding properly on my bicycle, not sleeping properly, having it caused from inflammation of soft tissue in the elbow. Very, very painful. In fact, more painful, I think, than even knee injuries. Because knee injuries, you kind of work it out just by keeping your blood flowing. This is one of those things that there's just no way around it, and exercise makes it even worse. So, and there's not really a whole lot of cardio you can do with your arms other than some rowing. But your legs, you can do some cardio with that, keep the blood flowing if you have some knee injuries. Riding the bicycle, it does it better, whereas if you get some bursitis in your elbow, this is going to make it worse. Okay, so you want to keep your arms at a nice, even bit apart, so you're comfortable. Your hands are on the hoods here, so your hoods play a very important part with the comfort of the handlebars, which is one of the nice things that they've done, what Shimano has done with their new brake levers, so that you can have your hands here very comfortably. They made this a little bit more ergonomic, so that you can get one finger in here, you can get a second finger in here, you can kind of pull on it, or you can just use your last fingers. You got full control. You don't have to change the positioning of your hands here with the brake levers. Okay, they put a little bit of kind of a thumb rest almost back here. The other thing is, and if you'll notice, some pro riders, when they want to get a little bit more aero beyond the handlebars, on the hoods, they will grab the tops here, put the rest kind of their hands here, and they'll just drop their elbows down. Okay, so almost like it's almost like they have aero bars. Okay, so because you can rest your elbows like this, and you'll see some riders that do this, especially some very tall riders. But you don't have a lot of control here, and you have no access to your brake levers. Okay, so like this with your hands up here, you don't really have a whole lot of access to braking, but you do have some shifting access. So some people do that. That does get you a little bit more aero. You can do that. One of the reasons I went with this type of bike, it's a lot more aero. I don't have to do extra stuff to stay aero because I am down a little farther, so I can stay on the hoods quite a bit. I don't like to shift my hand positions a ton unless I'm going into the drops. Okay, so got the drops here, so we can use this to stay on the drops. And I go, normally I won't be up here if I'm going to be using the drops. I'll be all the way down at the bottom. Now some people will shift their handlebars, rotate this down a little bit. They'll get these down a little bit so that they can be up here and grabbing these, but still be down here so they can get a little bit more with the brake levers, but I don't really do that. So if I'm down here, I'm pretty much sprinting. Okay, so up here riding for most of the part. So this is where most of the comfort comes from. Like I said, you can go with a carbon fiber handlebar. That will help with dampening a lot of vibration and stuff. One other thing that a lot of people forget is bar tape. Okay, one of the things you'll see in the Paris-Roubaix, which is one of the most brutal as far as just tearing apart people's arms and their hands and everything, because you're talking about something that should be mountain bike and you're riding a road bike, okay, on these cobbles. And one of the things they do is they have extra padded gel bar tape when they're riding to add some vibration reduction. Okay. One other thing that I tend to do is when I'm riding in a more upright position, I have my hands here up on the tops. Instead of gripping like this, where I got my thumbs here and I'm white knuckling the bar or handlebars, I kind of just rest my hands very lightly like this, and I just kind of stay in this type of position. Okay. If you do it a lot and you tend to push a little bit more forward, you might think about wrapping your bar tape a little differently, which we'll cover in a different video. Okay, so overall though, like I said, you can change materials here. Your level 2 contact point is going to be obviously your stem vice your handlebars, and this can be important because it does give you distance pulling away from your seat or bringing you more towards your seat in a more upright position. Also, you have the amount of angle on your stem, and unlike my Jamis, I don't have as much angle on this because this is a lot more upright position sorry, not upright position. You got a lot straighter head tube on this Propel bike. So this is a more aggressive bike. It's putting you out a little bit farther. This stem, which even though it has a slight angle drop, I think it's about a 6 degree vice the 15 degree that I have on my Janus. It is a little bit longer stem, and it is a lot more slammed. As you can see here, I have no spacers here. I just have our dust cap, and then I have 2 small spacers at the top. Cut everything else, slammed it down as far as we could go, and that's how I ride. Now, does that add to comfort? Can that change your comfort? Yes. Depends how far down you want, how flexible you are. That can add to comfort. But as far as your hands, numbness, things like that, that's mostly with the width of the handlebars, how you wrap the bar tape, things like that. So, as far as fit is concerned, folks, that's one of the things to remember. Basics, start off with matching the handlebars to the width of your elbows. That's one of the first things to remember. That will get you in the ballpark. From there, it's just trying different widths of bicycles. One thing you can do, and this is what I always recommend, is get to your local bike shop. Get to your local bike shop. They will get you on some different size bicycles. If you're really serious about a specific bike, like maybe this Giant Propel SLR or the Janus Ventura, or any type of bike that you're interested in, you get into the local bike shop, they will fit you for that bike. So if it comes down to it, like on that Janus Ventura up on my wall, the stem that came with it was a little bit too long for me at the time, so they got a shorter stem. Now it had a little bit more of an angle to it, which brought me a little bit more upright, but over time as I started to get more flexible, I dropped it down, got rid of the spacers, then eventually I switched the position of it, put it at a negative degree, and then eventually I just chopped off, and I fully slammed it. I even got the spacer that was here, the dust cap was a taller one. Eventually I just got rid of that altogether and got a very, very short headset spacer there for the bearings. So just absolutely slammed it all the way and got it a lot more down in more aero position. And then obviously I've gone to this bike here, which I'm riding now. I don't have near the miles on it on the Giant Propel, but we got quite a few miles on it so far. Really liking this bike. Really love the fit that I have with this. So I've changed my fit a little bit. That doesn't mean I'm not going to ride my Janus. Still, no, I still ride that bike. I still do some endurance rides with it. Some, not so much hill climbs, or sorry, not so much. This is a little bit lighter bike, so it tends to be a little just as good for hill climbs, but that's gets you more in an upright position, a little bit breathing. So if I'm going to do nothing but hill climbs and nothing else, no descents, no nothing, that's a better bike up there because you're sitting a little bit more upright. Okay, so even though it's a heavier bike, it tends to be a lot better for climbing just because it's a little bit more relaxed geometry. Okay, overall, like I said, this is some basics. You can get into a lot of math. You can get into a lot of science as far as your bike fit is concerned, especially with your handlebars. But hopefully this gives you some insight into how your third level 1 bike fit component works, and that's your handlebars. So remember, first of all, your pedals, second of all, your saddle, then your handlebars. Vital components to keeping you comfortable and fit on your bike. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you liked, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. And like always, folks, give us a like. That always helps us out with more videos. And like always, keep riding.